Welcome to Let's Talk About It, broadcasting live from North Nashville, Tennessee. North Nashville spans from Metro Center down to the border of Bicentennial Mall, including the neighborhoods of Bordeaux, Buena Vista, Parkwood Estates, Germantown, Haynes Manor, Jefferson Street, Fisk Park, Cumberland Gardens, Oak Valley, Enchanted Hill, and many others. It's perhaps best known for the three universities housed here, including Tennessee State University, Fisk University, and Meharry Medical College. North Nashville home to the Ted Rhodes Golf Course. Ted Rhodes was a renowned, black professional golfer from Nashville who paved the way for other black golfers like Charlie Sifford, Lee Elder, Renee Powell, and Tiger Woods. North Nashville is also home to the American Baptist College, a historically black college with a liberal arts emphasis, is to educate, graduate, and prepare diverse students for Christian leadership, service, and social justice in the world.
Now live from North Nashville, Dr. William Head. Let's talk about it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Always Disrespected, Always Neglected North Nashville. That is to include South Nashville and East Nashville. Anywhere there's a propensity of people of color, black people, brown people, all the way to the international end of Nolensville Road. It is such a wonderful place to go. I go shopping out there just to go in and see all the people. It's a wonderful situation. I am proud to be a Nashvilleian when I'm in that part of the city. The unthinkable has happened. What do you say? What do you ask is the unthinkable? The Jacksonville Jaguars today fired the great Urban Meyer as their head football coach after having him as their head coach for only I think 13 games, and they are now 2-11. So Brother Meyer is gone. The straw that broke the camel's back, I suppose, was the fact that his field goal kicker revealed that Mr. Meyer kicked him during a practice session and told him he needed to do better with kicking field goals. Now, this is a cautionary tale for all you folks who have sons who are considering playing big-time college football. Mr. Meyer is a reflection of big-time college football. The stuff that he has done, he hired a man who was a known bully and racist to be the strength coach. He ends up with having kicked a young man. Now, if he was at Ohio State or University of Florida, you'd have never heard of it. But these are grown men. My admonition to a group of gentlemen that I do a podcast with called Sports Corner, I told them that Meyer's biggest problem is finding out if he can supervise men. Young men, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, are entirely different from men who are working for a living, and you are their supervisor. The young men on the college campus know that the coach has all the power over whether or not where they sleep, when they sleep, how they eat. So he has an ability to control the situation completely. Now, these men that he coaches in the NFL are men with wives, families, and responsibilities. And in having those, they don't have time for the old coach's thoughts on how to treat someone. The kicking of people for a long time, especially black people, has been a real touchy situation. You pick your foot up, you may not have it when you get ready to put it down. If you kick someone that knows the history of being kicked by someone. During slavery, the thing to do if a slave was out of order, the least he got was a swift kick. So when you kick someone, know that there is some history in that kick that may get you kicked back, or someone will take your foot and shove it where you don't want it. I'm giving you my warning again. Warning, 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 William Head. Warning. If your child gets on a bus and goes all the way across town to a school, given the tenor of the country, given the fact that the states that have gun laws that allow anyone 18 years of age and above to carry a concealed weapon, whether they have a license or any training or anything else, your child is at risk when one of these folks go off. Now, where do you find your child if this goes off and they are 15, 18 miles across town? You need to establish you a place where your children can go that is safe so that you can find them and get them home. I don't want you to think that I'm trying to make you afraid. I want you to be warned. As a friend of mine says, prepare for war in times of peace. You need to make sure that you can find your child if something breaks down, especially if they're a great distance from you. And a great distance in a city like Nashville or Jacksonville, Florida, or Houston, Texas, may vary from 15 to 30 miles. You need to have a safe place where you can meet your child. Simply said. I don't want you to be afraid. The basic thing is to bring your child back closer to home where they go to school. And talking about closer to home, Deion Sanders yesterday got a commitment from a young man who is the number 2 player in the country to go to Jackson State University. Now, on the surface, you would think that's just his out recruiting other larger institutions. But it may signal that parents are finding out that sending my son to Podunk, Mississippi to go to school and his skin is melanated, might need to check up on that now. I'm not telling you to segregate yourself. I'm telling you to make sure that when your child leaves your care, given Mr. Myers' attitude and actions, is that really where you want him to be? HBCUs have always been about taking folks where they are and lifting them above where they thought they could ever reach. I am a living proof of that. Think about where you send your child to go to school. He spends his entire career in those places. He stays there for 4 or 5 years and gets a general service degree, which generally doesn't qualify him to do anything general or specific. So when you go on a visit, look and see who you see. If everybody that has responsibility that is of color has on a white jacket or an apron, that may not be the place you want to send your child. Is that the representation that you want? That your child can only look forward to being a food service worker? Or, heaven forbid, a preacher that preaches the gospel of the slave Bible? Be true to your massa. Hey, just talking, just informing. Not a problem with me. But think about who care. Do you care? Does your uncle care more about your child than Coach Nobody somewhere 350 miles away? Probably does. Again, oh, by the way, the large institutions are extremely mad at the Jackson State University program for recruiting a black youngster. Wow, sounds strange to me. Sounds very strange. They probably say, y'all playing the race card. Absolutely. If you don't take it out of the deck, we'll continue to play it. Look it up. We play with 53 cards. We always have the race card because you keep it in the deck. Ladies and gentlemen, today I get to introduce a lady who is a good friend of mine. We started Fisk University in 1965. She was an early entrant. She was probably about 12 or 13. And she is a young woman who we're going to talk to today. Carol, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you. How are you this evening?
I am well. I'm very well. I hope you are the same.
Hey, better than I deserve. Absolutely. Carol, my first encounter of you as Carol Mall, freshman at Fisk, was in the student union building down on the lower level. And you were talking to a group of, I don't remember specifically, it's been so long ago, but I think you were talking to a group of young ladies and everybody was brand new on the campus, and you spoke of being in the 16th Avenue Baptist Church in March 1963 when it was bombed. Tell us a little bit about the background of that, please.
All right, I will. That day, September 15th, 1963.
I'm sorry, September.
It is seared in my memory. And so are the pictures of the things that I saw on that day. But Birmingham was, we had many students protesting during that time. Our leadership, for the most part, had been Reverend Fred Lee Shuttlesworth. And Fred Shuttlesworth had invited Martin King to come to Birmingham. Dr. King was finishing his work in Albany, Georgia, and Reverend Shuttlesworth said, you know what, we sure could use your help if you can come to Birmingham. And Dr. King responded. He did come to Birmingham, and I think they began to just dialogue and talk about the current conditions in Birmingham, the things that they would like to see changed, some of the things that they wanted to discuss with the city leaders. And, I just happened to be at the church at 16th Street. I'm a lifelong member there, but or had been for up until about 10 years ago. But I volunteered there a lot. I would go after school sometimes and help do the phones and on Sundays count the offering. And I just happened to be there doing some work when they had that first mass meeting scheduled. And this was the beginning of what we all know today as the Children's March. But the events that would follow that, the events that you're speaking of, the bombing of the church and so forth, that would later be referred to as the bomb that was heard around the world. And it resonated, the cause, the hatred, the things that were being spewed at that time resonated around the world. And I think in general, the reaction from everywhere was really killing little girls in church, really? You know,
I have a question right there.
okay.
The being a little boy in Lebanon, Tennessee, looking at a black and white television, the vision of the demonstrations downtown with the dogs and the fire hoses and so forth and so on. Did the bombing occur before that, during that, or after that?
The bombing occurred after the demonstrations downtown.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Okay. You know, the records tell us that during that period of marching, well, let me go back to the church and say this was the very first mass meeting. There were 6 people that attended that meeting that you would recognize their names. That would be Reverend Fred Lee Shuttlesworth, Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Andrew Young, Reverend Fred Abernathy, Dr. Martin Luther King, and James Bevel, Reverend James Bevel. And each one was talking to the group of young people in the church. The church was filled. And, you know, in 1963, William, we would have said to people that the church holds about 1,800 to 2,000 people. Today we say 1,400, but the church was completely full from top to bottom, balcony, floors, benches. There were young people that had come from all over the city to march for the cause of freedom, and primarily, as Reverend Shuttlesworth would say, for the cause of ending segregation. His mantra was, "We aim to kill segregation or be killed by it." And so he was very, you know, many of his speeches were very profound in terms of trying to place in front of us the seriousness of the situation and the all or nothing decision that we were actually having to make. And so those meetings took place for the most part at 16th Street Baptist Church because of its size. But there were other churches in Birmingham, not a lot of them, but there were many others that opened their doors for those meetings as well. And the records tell us that over a period of several weeks, over 5,000 children went to jail. Thousands of children marched, but over 5,000 of those went to jail. And they ranged in ages from 8 to 80. Yeah.
I was looking at a documentary about the filling of the jail in Birmingham, that was full to overflowing. There was no space whatsoever, and it was really getting to be a problem for the sheriff and the jail itself. Birmingham, to me, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma are the 3 most significant names in all of the civil rights era marches, and that was simply because I was a country boy in Tennessee watching it on TV.
Okay.
Go ahead. Tell me how that felt, being in the very center of the tornado that was the civil rights marches.
All right. I'm not sure what are you asking me to just talk about the marches, perhaps?
No.
Or?
Well, I'm trying to lead up to the actual morning of the bombing.
The bombing. Okay. All right. Well, you know, with all of the marching and the embarrassment that was seen worldwide of little children being put in jail and hosed with water, the city fathers decided to come, the city leaders decided to come together with those men that I just mentioned, and to try and work out some type of agreement um, that would be, I guess, amenable to both groups. And they were, as we understood it, they were very close to an agreement. Reverend Shuttlesworth and those already had their demands in order. They already knew the things that they wanted to change. The very first thing was to get rid of all of the segregation laws in the state of Birmingham and Alabama. That was the first thing. And then they wanted to hire for some of the public jobs. We're talking about policemen, the bus drivers back then, just everyday job. They wanted to have blacks be considered for those jobs as well. So they already had their list of demands, and the word was that they were doing pretty well at coming to some type of agreement. Many people believe that the bombing of the church, and we know that it was a Klan bombing, but they believe that this bombing was a direct result. It was meant to deter that agreement coming to fruition. It was meant to frighten everyone enough that everything would stop. The church itself had been seen sort of as the central or the focal point of the march, simply because this is where most of the major meetings took place. It was the largest church, the largest black church in the city of Birmingham, and they needed that space, and so it became kind of the central location. But we feel that someone, whoever in the Klan was thinking about this, felt if we could remove the nucleus, if we can remove that meeting place, if we can, thwart the meeting place, then they will have nowhere to meet, and they'll be frightened enough that maybe they'll just go home and they won't do anything. So the bomb was definitely a threat to those that were marching, those that were determined to end the second-class citizenship that existed in Birmingham. Birmingham Negroes, as they were called back then, Birmingham Negroes or blacks, had all of the responsibilities of citizenship, but they had none of the privileges. Their tax dollars supported public libraries, which they were not able to use. The tax dollars supported the libraries, the public parks, all of the public things that were supported and enjoyed by tax dollars were off limits to people of color. And so they wanted to end the second-class citizenship and become first-class citizens, doing everything that every other citizen was doing. And so that was the crux of the march. And the bombing of the church was meant to, I think, to detract from a lot of that. Now, what we would learn later in the trial, that I was a subpoenaed witness to the last trial. The testimony from Bob Cherry or Robert Cherry was that the bomb was never meant to hurt anyone.
Yeah. When was the last time there was a bomb that was built that was not meant to hurt anyone? But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it?
Yes.
But no, I just wanted to make that point. It was a homemade bomb, and the defendant said it did not go off when it was supposed to go off. Mm. And so supposedly, according to the testimony in court, it should have gone off. Being homemade and with the ingredients, they should have been able to time when the combustion would occur, and it should have happened, according to them, about 2 or 3 in the morning. Somehow they miscalculated, I suppose, but the time of the bomb explosion was 10:22 a.m. Sunday morning. Right now, the FBI list of people present lists 75 people at the church on that morning. And it was a dark day, a very dark day.
It was a dark day looking at it from the outside, looking at it from the perspective of Walter Cronkite talking about it. Tell me how it was from the inside, as having been. I had my wife was telling me today, I think it was, that people who are involved in catastrophic events carry those events inside them for the rest of their lives, and it affects their very being. Tell me about your feeling, or just keep explaining what you're explaining.
Okay.
It's so interesting.
All right. Well, when the church itself exploded, I was upstairs and I was collecting Sunday school contributions and so forth. And it doesn't sound quite the same if you're inside the building as it would have sounded to the people on the outside. So I really thought that I was hearing thunder initially when I heard that explosion. I just thought it was thunder or something. And then the windows came crashing in. Mm. And then I heard a lot of people screaming and running. And you could hear them running because in the church, we didn't have carpet in 1963. We had hardwood floors, and you could hear people got very quiet for a moment. They were under the benches, not sure what was coming next. And then all of a sudden you could hear feet, people running out of the church. I will tell you that I think you're right, or your wife or the person that made that comment is absolutely correct. I really began to think a lot about that. I tried really hard to understand, especially when no one was brought to justice for that tragedy. The first person only person that was arrested back then was 14 years later. And I tried to understand how you could kill someone and not be held accountable. That was what I really struggled with a lot. And to personalize this a little bit more, I will tell you the names of the girls that were killed. And for example, Cynthia Wesley was 14 years old. She was my best friend. And Cynthia's father was my principal in elementary school, grades 1 through 8. Dr. Claude Wesley was my principal for 8 years. So these were not random people. They were not people that I knew in passing. I mean, I played with these girls. I saw them at church on Sunday. We were in a club together. Denise was 11, and Denise's father was my 9th grade teacher at Parker High School. He was also one of 2 photographers that we had back then. If you wanted pictures made for weddings or graduations, Chris McNair was the person you called, or the other guy. But again, everything was segregated. So we had special people to go to and to call. And Denise's dad was our teacher, but was also that person for photography. And Carol Robertson's mother was active in the library system. Carol was an avid Girl Scout. She was 14 years old. And Addie was one of 4 girls in a family that were there. Addie was killed, and one of Addie's sisters was injured quite a bit. But I mentioned that to say that these were not people that I did not know. I knew them as well as I knew my 2 little brothers were there with me that Sunday, and I knew these girls, I think, about as well as I knew my brothers. Mm. And so I had to, my brothers were 6 and 10, and I had to just kind of spend some time going back and forth looking for them, and eventually I found them. Well, I didn't find them. My father, in traveling back to the church, he had dropped us off, but in coming back, he encountered one of those brothers running toward downtown, the 10-year-old. And the 6-year-old was commandeered by a man that was just walking on the street, and he said that my brother grabbed his leg and wouldn't turn him loose.
I'm sure he was frightened.
he was very frightened, and he was after a point was able to get the home phone number from him, I think, and called my mother. We had one car, so she said, "Well, we'll be there to pick him up when the car comes home. You know, when my husband gets home." But the day itself was horrible, and then I learned about 3 o'clock that same day that the girls had not made it out of the bathroom.
Wow.
And that's where they were when they were killed. But we also got up Monday morning and we went to school. We were in our seats at 8 o'clock, and there was no mention of the bombing of the church. There was no therapeutic sessions or psychiatrists there saying, "Well, would you like to talk about this? What do you think?" Or there just was nothing. There was not a memorial program at the school. There was not 5 minutes of silence or silent prayer. There just was nothing. And even after we moved back into the church, it took 8 months to renovate the church. But even after we moved back into the church, there was no memorial ceremony. There were no classrooms named after any of the girls. It was just as though everybody wanted to move on as though it had never happened.
Well, one of the things that you just said about school, for some reason, to this day, when awful things happen in our neighborhoods, the thing is that we walk away from it, take whatever it is with us, and that's it. If there's a shooting at a major high school in town, that in this town is how to find a high school that's predominantly white, except when you get to the west side of town. But it always strikes me strange that there's never anybody that offers counseling to the predominantly black student body at these high schools.
That's right.
And our children are traumatized just like their children are.
That's right. Even some of the shootings that we see today, where children are present, where children are just happen to be on the scene when someone is shot or choked to death or whatever is happening at the moment, and we have them. There are not. There is a recognition today how much that response is needed, but traditionally, I think you're absolutely correct. Traditionally, we've had to just kind of pick our stuff up and go on.
Yeah, when someone loses a child, that for anybody's child, black, white, green, whatever, there ought to be an opportunity for those who were close to, witnessed, or otherwise affected by it to have a moment, if nothing else, with someone who can sit and basically talk with them about their feelings. And that does not happen enough in our community.
It does not happen enough. And, there's one thing I think is important to know. This was not the first bomb that had exploded in Birmingham.
Oh, no.
At the time of that bombing in 1963, there were over 60 unsolved bombings.
60 unsolved bombings.
60 unsolved bombings. It was as though they just couldn't seem to figure out who was doing this. Now, that was in September, so we fast forward to April of 1964, and in my house, where there were 6 children, we were awakened in the morning about somewhere around 3:30ish in the morning by the sound of a house across the street being bombed.
Oh, my gosh.
And, I have to say, being inside of the church I think we were shielded from a lot of the noise of it, the impact. We didn't feel it quite the way we felt it in that little house, you know. And all of the windows came crashing in, and they had bombed the house of our neighbors across the street because those two children had gone to schools. They were part of the American Friends program that existed back then. And one had gone to Yellow Springs, Antioch in Yellow Springs, Ohio, Yellow Springs, and the other one had gone to Dartmouth.
Okay.
And when they came home, they brought their white friends with them.
Wow.
And this was a reminder to all of us that, hey, we don't do that. We don't do that in Birmingham. You know, one of the things that I put in that book, in the back of my book, are sample segregation laws, so that, of course, you could Google them at any time and see the extent to which the restrictions were placed on the citizens of color in Birmingham. And
Jim Crow was alive and well.
absolutely.
Carol, we're going to a commercial and we'll be right back on Let's Talk About It. And your
In 1973, the Fisk University radio station, WFSK, formerly WFEN, became the first African America FM radio station in Nashville. At that time, all the DJs and hosts were Fisk men until 2005, when then President Hazel O'Leary felt that there needed to be female representation at the radio station instead of an all-male cast of characters. That female representative was Sharon Kay, who was hired as general manager of Jazzy 88 WFSK that year. The 411 with Sharon Kay is an award-winning syndicated empowerment and encouragement program. The popular talk show airs live twice a week from the studios of Jazzy 88 WFSK at historic Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee on Wednesday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Sunday mornings from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Over the years, the informative talk program has hosted fundraisers for various causes in the community, lead community-based initiatives, connected mentors to Ments, family members, hosted political forums, and has been a ratings leader.
So in 2023, WFSK will be celebrating 50 years of service to Nashville. And I say on behalf of Black Radio, that is an extraordinary thing. So I want to thank all of you over the years that have supported this station, the businesses that have supported and sponsored and underwritten here, the donors who still continue to give. We thank you, because without you, WFSK would not be here today.
And we're back with my good friend Carol Maul McKinstry down in Beeham. Carol, I'm interested in the nature of your. You say you were subpoenaed to testify in the trial of Bob Dynamite Cherry, and you were. What was the nature of and the tenor of the situation when you had to testify?
Well, you know, I received that subpoena at work. I was still working telecommunications back then. But
What year? Tell us what year that was, though, so
that
everybody knows how far everything progressed before it ever happened.
Yeah, that was 2002.
And the bombing was
1963.
absolutely.
Yeah. I was at work, and the security guard called me and said there was someone downstairs to see me. And when I went downstairs, the gentleman handed me a folded piece of paper and said, "This is a subpoena. You're hereby ordered to appear in court." And I took it and I went back upstairs to my desk and I started reading it. And I thought about the person that had been pursuing this case was Doug Jones, who was senator for a while in Alabama. Back then, he was not senator then, but he was pursuing the case and handling the case for the state. So I thought it was from him, and when I read it, I called him. I said, Doug, I have a subpoena here, and I assume you want me to talk about the church or some aspect of my involvement in the church. And he said, well, I don't think I sent you a subpoena. He said, fax me a copy of it. And I did, and he called me back and said, this subpoena is not from me. It is from the attorney who's representing Bob Cherry.
Oh, man.
So that was totally unexpected on my part. And from there, I think I started kind of a mental meltdown. I didn't understand. And I said, well, I'm not going. I told Doug Jones, I said, I'm not going. And he said, well, Carolyn, they arrest you if you don't show up when they've sent us. And I said, well, you tell the judge that I'm sick or something. And he said, well, whatever your excuse is, it still remains the prerogative of the judge to say, okay, we accept that. You can do it by phone or you don't have to do it at all, whatever he's going to say. But it's not your decision anymore. And I really stewed over it for a while because the last thing I wanted was to be sitting in court across from the people that I knew were responsible for what happened in September of 1963. But the more I talked with Doug, he said, I promise if you just go ahead, I won't ask any questions. We'll just see what they want. We'll see what their game is. And I did go to the courtroom on the day I was designated to go. My husband went with me, and I think I had my coat over my head. But he could only go as far with me. He couldn't come to the holding room.
Right.
He had to go and sit out in the courtroom. And so I sat in the holding room with the family of Bobby Cherry.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he had two grandsons in there, and he had a couple of neighbors in there, and the pastor of his church was there. And so I was required to sit there until I was called out into the courtroom to take the witness stand. And I just felt that this was the ultimate insult. I felt I was being abused. I was so angry. And I will tell you that I was actually still a little bit, I don't know if frightened is the word, but the thought of sitting across from that person, if you're sitting in the witness stand, you will be sitting across from the person that is on trial. And I just struggled with it a lot. It was almost adding insult to injury.
Wow. That had to be almost as traumatic as anything you've ever been through. Now, how did that testimony go after you gathered yourself and started to answer questions?
Well, I was able to answer the questions. Some of those questions didn't make sense to even ask me. He said, "Did you know?" Now, I'm an adult at this point, a really grown adult. And he said, did you know that Mr. Cherry was in the hospital on the night of the bombing? Well, no, I would have no way to know that. We weren't even blacks weren't permitted to even go in the hospital as patients.
Wow.
So how would I have known that, He asked me what my role was at the church at this point, and I was chairman of the trustee board and chairman of the church's foundation at that time. And he was asking those questions like that, but I'm not sure what the significance of my responses to those questions would have been for him. but I answered his questions. They were mostly, for the most part, they were personal questions, and about me and my involvement in the church and so forth. But I answered all the questions, and after what appeared to be maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so, I don't remember the time frame. I was released to go back into the holding room.
So he didn't ask anything about the day of the bombing.
They did not ask anything about the day of the bombing. It seems that maybe he might have asked me what I was doing or what was my role at the church. At that time, I was the secretary of the Sunday school, even though I was a child, you know. But aside, they were just general questions. They did not help anything, and they did not hurt anything. It's kind of like asking someone, how old are you, you know, or what's your name. It doesn't really do anything. The question was meaningless, in my opinion. The questions just had no value.
Well, we talked about the bombing, the day of the bombing, just a little bit. I would like to simply ask you the aftermath around the bombing, the day of it. How hectic and frightening was that for a 14-year-old child?
You know, it was chaos. After we, those that were on the floor, after we thought it was safe to exit the building, when we went outside, the church was already surrounded by police, and they had barricaded the streets that led to the church. And some of the people in the community were outside of those barricades, and they were not really very happy about the fact that another bomb had exploded in Birmingham. And within a few minutes, there were also people like my dad who had learned about the church bombing, who had rushed down there looking for their families so that they could take them home. And it was just chaos. People were everywhere and just all over the place. And I went back and forth into the church looking for my brothers, who eventually were found by other people. But I would not find out until about 2:30 later that day. Remember, the bombings at 10:22 a.m. I would not find out until about 2:30ish later that day that the girls had never made it out of the bathroom.
That it took that long to find that out?
Well, it may not have taken that long, but someone called my mother, and I learned the news from my mother around that time. I suspect that probably within 30 minutes, one of our deacons tells the story that he heard someone saying help, moaning. And there were actually, William, 5 girls in the bathroom. 1 survived. And that was the person that he heard moaning. So in the process, they began digging at the rubble. They just figured maybe there are other people buried here. And that's when, as the pastor said, once they removed the rubble, they found the 4 girls. He said they were all on top of each other.
Mm. Well, see, the inhumanity that represents is just gut-wrenching even today when you think about it. It's you bomb a church. Now, church bombings were not unusual. Church arson was not unusual. And you said there was 60 plus unsolved bombings in Birmingham itself before the bombing of the church.
That's right.
And you guys have a hill in Birmingham, as it was called Dynamite Hill.
Dynamite Hill. That's
now,
right.
What is the significance of Dynamite Hill? I started listening to your book on an ebook. It was mentioned, but it Was Dynamite Hill a significant residence of people of color?
Well, so here's the way it started. There was an imaginary dividing line in Birmingham that separated the white community from the black community. And that imaginary dividing line was Center Street.
Okay.
That's what the street is called, Center Street. And someone either accidentally or intentionally, I'm not sure which, sold a house that was on the wrong side of the street to a black family.
Ooh.
And the Klan came out and said, this was in 1948, either you move them or we'll move them. And that's the first record that we have of a bomb exploding in Birmingham, 1948. But now, the Center Street community, there are communities on both sides. It became Dynamite Hill because also in that area was the home of Arthur Shores. He was the attorney for Dr. Martin Luther King when he was in Birmingham. We had many of our preachers and teachers that lived in that vicinity. And if you went to the very top of the hill where the street ended, the home of Angela Davis sits up there at the top of the hill.
Okay.
And so there were this community, I would say it like this community represented Birmingham's, those that had managed to climb a little bit higher than some of the others. You know,
Okay.
in terms of being attorneys and teachers, and some of the teachers had, we had a couple of teachers in high school that already had earned doctorates, you know, back then. And
Very unusual back then.
it was very unusual back then, and some of these teachers were in the high schools, but we had black doctors. But if you were a doctor, you could only work in the black community or the black hospital. And the same thing was true with the teachers. You could have a doctorate, a PhD in your field of study, but you still were only going to use it. We had I'm trying to think of her name. She's a graduate of Fisk University. She had a PhD in French.
Oh.
And she had traveled to France as part of her work getting this PhD, but she was a professor here, but in a high school, a black high school. And because blacks did not serve in white hospitals, they did not serve in white institutions, period. So, but we had some very well-trained teachers during that time. In fact, the person that I call the historical architect of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute was a high school teacher before she became the architect for building the institute, and then later the president of the board.
Birmingham was such and it sounds stupid, but pivotal point in the civil rights movement. Montgomery was the flashpoint with the bus boycott. And by the way, Montgomery's transit system still suffers from that boycott because black folks in Montgomery do not ride the bus to this day.
That's right.
But the city is required to provide a mass transportation system. And I thought I heard you say the other day that Birmingham does not have a mass transportation system.
A public transportation
Right.
system. We actually have a very limited bus service. I think it runs from maybe 8 to 3 or 4, something like that. And it only runs in very limited areas. It doesn't doesn't enter most of the areas you would want to go for shopping or for other things, even just visiting someone. It does not have that as part of its route. I will say to you that the bombing of the church became known as the bomb that was heard around the world. Initially it was a phrase that someone adopted, but I found in the places that I have been able to travel, as far as India, as far as Rome, and at one point to Benedictine Monastery in Dublin, Ireland. And don't you know that everywhere I went, people, the first thing they ask you is, where are you from? And whenever I would say Birmingham, as far away as that monastery, they looked at me as if to say, oh my, what have we here? A person of color that has traveled all this distance, and I suspect the monks were asking, I wonder what the state of her soul is.
The state of your soul was far advanced than anybody they'd ever met.
Well, I'm not sure what they thought about it, but as I say, it was known as the bomb that was heard around the world. People were so shocked that somebody would kill children in church. The other thing, at one point after the Institute, Birmingham Civil Rights Institute opened, F.W. de Klerk came to Birmingham, he and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And one of the things that they said to us, at least Desmond Tutu, pointed squarely to the children of South Africa. He said, when they saw the children in Birmingham marching on television, it was then that they began their struggle and their fight to dismantle apartheid. So he was saying to all of the people present there that the children of Birmingham changed the course of history and inspired others to do the same thing, which I thought was the ultimate compliment for those that had, been part of the marching and so forth.
Absolutely. Carol, we got to go to one more commercial, and we'll be right back with Let's Talk About It.
Hello, my name is Glenn Carter. I'm the owner here at Carter's Family Florist. We've been serving all over Nashville and Middle Tennessee for the last 25 years. We do flowers for all occasions. We do weddings, funerals. We send flowers out of town. I have a host of plants, corsage for the prom, a dozen roses at Valentine, a dozen roses for Mother's Day. We do balloons, fruit baskets, and things of that nature, and we do deliver. So always come to Carter's Family Florist when you're in need of your flower needs. Address is 1822 26th Avenue North. That's Nashville, Tennessee, 37208. My phone number is 615-256-3777. Thank you for choosing Carter's Family Florist.
And we're back. Carol, as I listen to you talk, your extensive travel, your extensive work with the continued struggle for civil rights and freedom of people of color in this country and other places makes you a warrior of a different sort. Though you've been through all of that, you've not been on the front page of many newspapers. I would say that you deserve the front page of most newspapers in this country. The thing that interests me now, since we've pretty much discussed the tenor of the country, the level of discourse that created the bombing, since you have been on this pilgrimage that you are on, what are the most significant things that you found that have been informative and and reinforced your beliefs in what you're doing?
I think the number one thing I've learned is that freedom is never free.
Absolutely.
And whatever measure of freedom we have, every generation um, has that as their very first charge is to maintain the freedoms that have already been won and gained by the previous generations. It's also incumbent upon them to sort of look around and say, well, we achieved the freedom to go to school, but we don't have the freedom to work. But they have to assess. Every generation has to assess where they are and look at where they started and where they are, and then understand that freedom is not free. Even the gains that have been made may be lost or can be lost if we're not good watchmen, if our generations are not good watchmen. That's the first thing I've learned. I've also learned that there is no substitute for education. It is education that helps us, takes us off the periphery and helps us to understand history as it was 100, 200 years ago, and history as it has evolved and is today. And many of us, including yourself, have the privilege today of looking at quite a few struggles in our country, and we can all see the possibilities of changes that could occur even within our lifetime if we are not vigilant
Exactly.
about the freedoms that we have won.
January 6th told
Yeah.
everybody in this country, not just people of color, that they have to be vigilant, extremely vigilant, as they watch a man almost turn the country on its ear and put us in a very bad posture. Carol, we've got to shut down the show. I've got to have you back on so we can talk about the work that you have done over the last, I won't say how long we've known each other. But,
Okay.
but
You.
go ahead.
Thank you for not sharing that number.
Well, I'd be dating us both. That would probably, because I'm old enough to know better. In closing, as always, I quote the late Reverend Dr. Dale P. Andrews, the former chair of homiletics at the Vanderbilt University Divinity School. I have more questions than answers, more problems than solutions. From these gifts, I freely share. Let's talk about it, and then let's go do something about it. Action plan, move. If you see it, do it. If you see it, let somebody know. Have a